Hello viewers, thank you for joining me. I hope you don't mind an extra long introduction this time, but I have exciting channel news to share. For those of you who didn't see it, I now have access to the community tab. I'm planning to use it to let you guys decide which series I review next. It won't be every month. For example, I already know which anime I want to start off the new year with. But the poll for December's anime went up just before I posted this video. I'm really excited for this, and I hope you are too. It feels like a fun way to make this process just a little more interactive. And now, on to the review. Nisekoi is a series I've been aware of for a while, but only started taking an interest in recently. Something about these character designs and this art style always appealed to me, but the premise for the story... What can I say? Maybe it just took finding a few more romances I enjoyed. What sounded contrived and eye-roll worthy a few years ago started to sound kind of cute and fun. Do be warned that this series has 2 seasons. I generally make no effort to hold myself back from spoilers when I'm only covering the first half of a story, but I also feel like that warning doesn't hold as much weight for a series like this one. A lot of the meat of slice-of-life stories are the little details that usually don't come up in reviews. Little conversations and moments of character growth that just don't feel relevant when you're only discussing the big picture points. And particularly with this series, I really don't think knowing where everyone stands in the final episode would devalue your first watch through, but I'll get back to that. Nisekoi introduces us to Raku Ichijo, the heir to the biggest Yakuza family in the city, but nothing about him screams child of a gang leader. Raku's goals for the future include getting into a good college and becoming a respectable member of society. He's taken up cooking as his hobby, and is just all around a nice guy. Perfectly likable as a main protagonist. Maybe edging just a little bit into bland main guy being propped up by the more interesting pretty girls who surround him territory, but not egregiously so. I really don't have any complaints about Raku. He does have one interesting point, a big locket that he wears around his neck. He has somewhat vague childhood memories of a girl he befriended 10 years ago, when they would have been about 5. When they parted ways at the end of the summer, it was with a promise to meet again as adults and get married. This girl took a necklace of her own with her, a key that goes to his lock, but the vagueness is that he can't put a name or a face to this memory. In the present day, Raku's in high school and has a huge crush on one of his classmates, Koseki Onodera. Onodera actually returns his feelings, but is too shy to act on them, to the frustration of her harsh but supportive and very entertaining best friend Ruri. With Ruri pushing them forward, it would really just be a matter of time until these two got together, until Chitoge Kirisaki transfers into their class. Chitoge and Raku actually met out in the schoolyard on her first morning, and immediately got off on the wrong foot. Basically, he judges her for being too quick to violence, and she judges him for being too much of a pushover, but everyone else in their class is immediately taken with her. She's beautiful, athletic, her mom was Japanese, so she's fluent in the language, but she's been living in the US for most of her life, so she's got that exotic foreigner appeal going for her as well. And there's a little bit of a mystery involved, as she does her best to steer conversations away from any talk of her home life. But for Raku at least, that's not a mystery for long. Tensions in the city have gotten to an all-time high as a rival gangs moved into the Ichijo clan's turf. Raku comes home one day to find his father having a meeting with the rival gang's leader. Turns out the two are actually pretty good friends, and they've been putting together a scheme to calm the fighting, something their members will be sympathetic towards and not want to question. And what they've decided on is a relationship between their respective heirs, and of course, the rival leader's daughter turns out to be Chitoge. Neither of them are happy about this arrangement, but they agree to play along for the sake of not turning the city into a war zone, making any other romantic hopes he'd had a little more difficult. I thought this show got off to a really great start. I was really enjoying the early episodes. Everything was so over the top and moved so fast. It was a lot of fun, but it made time for some quieter moments that allowed you to get to know the characters too. I already mentioned that Raku was easy to like. No matter how much Chitoge annoys him, he's always quick to help her if she needs it. Holding grudges hardly seems to ever occur to him, and there's something super admirable about that. And Chitoge herself was pushy, but not really in a way that got on my nerves. Her specific complaints about not liking guys who can't stand up for themselves aren't unreasonable, but the real problem is that these two just haven't had the time to learn to understand each other yet. It's not that Raku's a total pushover, he just tries to pick his battles, and Chitoge has a softer side too. I actually think their best moment so far is still the little storyline they had in episode 3. Chitoge was really popular with her new classmates from the start, but Raku starts to overhear some of the girls in class gossiping about how she never accepts their invitations to hang out with them outside of school, how they're starting to suspect she's a little stuck up. But he soon learns that it's not that she's uppity, it's that she's insecure. He comes across Chitoge furiously jotting down notes throughout the day and holding up in a classroom, studying her notes after school. He discovers the notebook is all about her new classmates. She's trying to memorize their names and their interests. She's faced backlash in the past once kids she tried to befriend learned about her family situation. She's never really made friends with her peers before. She was hoping this move could be a fresh start, not realizing that, in her determination to make things perfect, she's losing her chance altogether. This is actually something Raku can relate with. It's not a problem now, but he faced similar judgment in elementary and middle school and had a similar approach to trying to make friends. He basically becomes her social tutor, and it's their first really good bonding moment. So I liked Chitoge from the start, but I was pleasantly surprised to learn that Onodera really was just as sweet as Raku always thought too, another character who was really easy to like. I feel like it's the mark of a great story, to be able to craft a cast of characters where the audience wants to root for all of them, even when they're in competition with each other. In the early days, what with the web of crushes, Nisekoi reminded me a lot of Toradora, which has maintained its spot as my favorite slice-of-life romance for quite a while now. This show was so much fun, I was willing to believe it could overtake that top spot, at first. Unfortunately, the writers weren't done introducing characters and setting up their tale. What I didn't realize going into this anime is that Nisekoi is a harem. And I don't mean to say that like it's a full stop on my opinion of this show or anything, because I've generally enjoyed harems in the past, but this one taught me that they have to be set up a certain way. Nisekoi's harem doesn't really work, because by the time some of these girls are introduced, it's just impossible to take them seriously as potential love interests. Just as we were getting settled in with our main trio, starting to explore them all and really question who I actually wanted to root for, Seishiro transfers into their class. Another transfer is no coincidence this time, because Seishiro was raised to be Chitoge's bodyguard. She was an orphan, taken in by the gang leader's second-in-command. Basically, she's one of those characters who grew up learning to be more tool than human, until she also falls victim to Raku's kindness and inability to hold a grudge, and she starts experiencing some very human emotions. Seishiro was particularly disappointing to me, because she was kind of a great character. Her personal story and inner turmoil were interesting, and I really liked her friendship with Chitoge. They are equally headstrong and oblivious about the same things, so they made for an entertaining comedic duo. Seishiro could have been a great character in another story. Here, where she was doomed to be nothing but an awkward third wheel at best. It was just unfortunate, and I hated that I started to resent her a bit for taking screen time away from the two I viewed as the real contenders. And that resentment was doubly true for Marika, who, out of 20 total episodes in this first season, wasn't even introduced until episode 14. They throw her in at the last minute to spice up the mystery a bit. which, for a few reasons, really wasn't necessary. It had been revealed at this point that Chitoge and Onodera both had memories of a boy they'd fallen in love with one summer 10 years ago, and that they both had keys that might go to his locket, only to then reveal that there was another girl he spent time with that summer who also has a key. And unlike Seishiro, who I kind of felt bad for, this one really tested my patience. Mari was the kind of pushy that was annoying, to make that comparison. Her father's the police commissioner, so 1, she's kind of got a spoiled, rich girl, I can do anything I want because my father is the law type thing going on. And 2, she could be really selfish in a way that was hard to support, in a I don't care who gets hurt as long as I get what I want sort of way. Her dad's the police, and Raku's dad's basically a criminal, so he was pressured into a deal where Raku would marry her once they're older. But unlike Onodera, who backs off anytime she starts to suspect Raku might have feelings for someone else, when Mari waltzes back into his life and sees him, supposedly, happily involved with someone else, she treats Chitoge like she's just been keeping her spot warm or something. Never mind Raku's protests that he never agreed to any engagement. I don't mean to make this girl sound like she's literally the devil and has no redeeming qualities. At least, I wanted to find something endearing about her. Mari's story is that she was really sickly as a child. Even as a teenager, she's a little more frail than her peers, prone to coming down with a fever from exertion or that kind of thing. The summer they met, she was confined to her room the whole time. Raku discovered her through the window one day while climbing the trees outside, and after that he came back to visit her every day with stories and little treasures he found in the woods. And that was sweet. The one time I did genuinely feel bad for her was when she reminded him of that summer, and unlike with the other two, he does remember her. She just wasn't nearly as important to him as he became to her. In general, though, it was just so hard for me to feel sympathetic for her, not only because her personality's unpleasant, but because, for how dismissive she is of other people and their feelings, she also has so little self-respect. At some point during that summer, she asked Raku what kind of girls he liked, and his answer was basically really proper feminine ones, so she spent the last 10 years growing out her hair and straightening out her country accent and embracing all the fancy manners her home tutors were teaching, turning herself into the kind of girl she thought he'd like, though her rougher, true self still slips in sometimes when she's caught off guard. When she comes back into the picture and her fairy tale doesn't play out the way she was imagining it, she asks him what he likes now and offers to become that girl. And that's just... no. I could kind of accept that outlook if she was still confined to her room all day, but she's not that same helpless little girl anymore. She's fought to be allowed out into the world a bit. It's time she starts chasing some bigger dreams than being a living doll for a boy who didn't even remember her. Just everything about Mari could have been skipped, and I really don't think the story would have suffered for it. She was a distraction at best, introduced way too late to be taken seriously as a love interest, and worse, taking time away from characters who still needed the time to grow. Initially, I was excited to see an unusual episode count. At the very least, I was glad I wouldn't have to worry about it being rushed, but if they'd cut out these distractions, these extra love interests who really didn't need to be there, I think it probably could have been told in just 13. Chitoge's the one who really suffered for it, because I'm pretty sure she's the one I'm supposed to be rooting for, the one he'll eventually end up with. I liked her early on, but I feel pretty disconnected from her right now. Surprisingly, she's the one getting lost in the crowd for me. Normally, she'd have no trouble standing out, but Mari's personality and Seishiro's insecurities are both as loud as anything she's brought to the table, and in the midst of all that noise, I found myself gravitating towards Onodera, who, as I said before, was just so easy to like. If she has any flaw at all, it's just that she's not bold enough to fight for what she wants, but even that's kind of admirable at times, because it's not just shyness, it's her tendency to put others first. And it helps, of course. or maybe doesn't help depending on the end goal here, that all the way up through episode 16, Raku's still wholeheartedly pursuing Onodera. It's not even that his crush wavers in the last few episodes, it's more that he's just starting to realize that he could have feelings for Chitoge also. And so we've looped back around to why I didn't really feel like you had to be worried about spoilers for Season 1. We're 20 episodes in, but it doesn't feel like this show has really arrived anywhere. It's definitely not the conclusive cutoff point I was envisioning. I don't know what Season 2 will bring, so I made this video just in case, but I seriously considered not stopping and covering all 32 episodes at once. I did really like the final episode, which is the play their class puts on for the school's cultural festival, and of course they're doing Romeo and Juliet, with Raku and Chitoge in the leading roles. But Chitoge took over the Juliet role from Onodera after she got hurt backstage. With no time to learn more than just the major lines, the rest of the class steps in to help ad-lib the story, and it winds up reflecting the tales of their real lives in a really entertaining version of what could basically be considered a recap episode. And I know I've said it didn't really feel like the story had reached a point where it made sense to stop yet, but it was a really fun way to wrap up a first season. I've liked Nisekoi so far, but it hasn't lived up to all my early expectations. This show got off to a really strong start, but then stumbled a little. It feels like it lost focus, adding in all these extra characters when it could have spent that time exploring the more important ones. I feel like I'm on the wrong side of the love triangle, as it stands right now. It really feels like Chitoge is going to be the one he ends up with, but I've started rooting more for Onodera, which has me a little worried about how much I'll enjoy watching this one wrap up. My big thing at the end of Season 1 is that the series hasn't given us any reason to believe he and Onodera wouldn't be perfectly happy together. I think that's something that really needs to be addressed before I could be happy with an ending that pairs him with Chitoge. They've spent 20 episodes dragging their heels about being willing to acknowledge just that they don't hate each other anymore. For Season 2 to wrap all this up in a way that feels satisfying, something needs to change. Thank you for watching.